Chapter 1. The legend of the Jameson began not on the high seas, but in the sun-drenched, chaotic parking lot of a Croatian marina. 7 guys, 3 countries, and a chaotic symphony of languages colliding in midair. There was Captain Carroll holding down the helm, backed by a crew of seasoned skippers, Theo, Peter, Gustav, Kuba, Yunus, and Mikhail. The reunion started the only way a proper sailing trip should, with warm hugs, booming laughs, and cold beers sweating in the Mediterranean heat. When the team finally took possession of the boat, a collective grin broke out. Compared to the last charter, this vessel was an absolute upgrade. A sleek, beautiful beast, proudly bearing the name Jameson, a fitting namesake for the days ahead. Before setting sail, however, the crew faced its first trial, provisioning for 6 days at sea. A squad of 3 was dispatched to the local Lidl, unsuspectingly stepping straight into the battleground. It turned out every single sailor in Croatia had the exact same idea at the exact same time. The aisles were an obstacle course of chaotic tourists, towering stacks of canned goods and tactical grocery maneuvers. In the middle of the madness, disaster struck. An entire shopping cart full of supplies was mercilessly stolen right under their noses. Undeterred, the trio pushed on, emerging victorious 90 minutes later with 3 overflowing carts of proviant. But the real challenge had just begun. The taxi queue was non-existent, and time was ticking. Enter Yunus, powered by sheer resourcefulness. Spotting a local driver with a large van, he approached him with a desperate plea. The local kindly agreed. Never mind the fact that his van was already fully occupied by his own family. With high spirits, the team crammed 3 massive loads of groceries, themselves and their gear, into every remaining square inch of the vehicle. What followed was a rally-style tour of Croatia's old town. The van zipped through impossibly narrow alleyways, swerving past pedestrians and missing parked side mirrors by mere millimeters. Inside, a chorus of multilingual directions rang out as everyone tried to help navigate the maze toward the marina. Just when it seemed they were home free, the van accidentally queued up in the line for the car shuttle ferry. A quick, expert reversal saved the day, dropping the weary shoppers right near the dock where the rest of the crew rushed over to haul the mountain of food aboard. With supplies stashed, the finish line was in sight. But with less than an hour until sunset, a crucial detail came to light. Where was the dinghy motor? A quick ping to the charter personnel solved the final mystery just in time, as the motor arrived minutes later and was clamped into place. The final hurdle was squeezing Jameson out of a tight, unforgiving marina berth. Captain Carroll took the helm, flanked by a crew that operated like a well-oiled machine. With smooth precision and perfect teamwork, they glided the boat through the narrow channel, leaving the harbor walls behind just as the sky turned deep shades of orange and purple. As the sun dipped completely below the horizon, the crew hoisted the sails into the twilight. With the dark sea opening up before them and the wind catching the canvas, the Jameson surged forward into the Croatian night. The wild day was behind them. The real voyage had just begun. Chapter 2. Leaving the harbor lights behind, the Jameson set her sights south, embarking on an all-night passage across open water. The sea was glass, shimmering under a brilliant moon that lit up a canopy of stars. A serene, quiet magic settled over the deck as the guys took turns at the helm through the night, punctuated by Peter catching the streak of a shooting star across the pitch-black sky. By morning, however, the tranquil sea showed its other face. As dawn broke, the wind roared to life, unleashing gusts of up to 20 meters per second, over 38 knots. The calm waters transformed into rolling, white-capped waves. Down below, anyone attempting to sleep was tossed around in their berths like dice in a cup. Up on deck, Captain Carroll kept a white-knuckled, steady grip on the wheel as the boat surged up the swells and surfed down the faces of the waves. Tacking straight into the teeth of the wind was grueling work. A relentless 16-hour battle against the elements as the crew raced to outrun a massive thunderstorm gathering on the horizon. Finally, the Jameson slipped into calmer waters, but the harbor had one last test waiting for the battered crew. Tying up to a mooring buoy in a crowded field tightly packed with other boats. With wind still whipping, the crew sprang to action. Carl carefully threaded the boat through the narrow gaps between neighboring hulls. Standing at the bow, a few of the guys leaned far over the edge with a boat hook, reaching down to snag the buoy loop. The first attempt narrowly missed as the boat drifted on the gust, but on the second pass, they hooked it, swiftly threaded the line, and secured the boat tight. A cheer and a round of applause erupted from the watching crews on nearby yachts who had been bracing for impact. Just as the last knot was tied, the sky broke. Torrents of rain pounded the deck, followed by a violent clap of thunder as lightning struck less than a kilometer away. The team bolted down the companionway into the safety of the cabin, soaked but triumphant. After 16 hours on a rolling sea without a single bite to eat, exhaustion and hunger had set in hard. Peter and Mikkel immediately stepped up to chef duty in the galley, whipping up a feast of pasta and fried sausage. In that moment, after hours of fighting 20 meters per second winds, simple hot food tasted like a Michelin star meal. With bellies full, the entire boat collapsed into a deep, well-deserved siesta, while the storm rattled outside. By late afternoon, the worst had passed. Deciding to play it safe, the crew opted to stay moored for 24 hours to let the weather settle completely. A few guys pumped up the dinghy and buzzed ashore to explore the local shoreline, stretching their legs on dry land. As evening fell, the rain cleared into a peaceful, washed-clean night. The grill was fired up on the stern, sizzling meat filling the salty air as cold beers were passed around. Sitting together on deck under the stars, laughing about the morning's wild surf and close-call lightning strikes, the storm had passed, leaving behind a crew bound tighter than ever. Chapter 3. The storm from the day before felt like a distant memory as the crew woke to clear skies, calm waters, and complete tranquility. The morning kicked off in the best possible way, everyone plunging into the deep blue Adriatic to wash away the fatigue and wake up the senses. Before lifting anchor, there was one piece of logistics to clear up, swapping out the leaky, slightly broken dinghy for a fresh replacement. With the new tender secured on board, the Jameson set her sights on the historic island of Vis. Though the wind was light, Captain Carol and Theo put on a masterclass in sail trimming. Tweak by tweak, line by line, they finessed the racing setup until the sails caught every stray breeze, unexpectedly pushing the boat up to a respectable 6 knots. It was pure, effortless sailing. The rest of the crew kicked back in the sun, soaking in the smooth ride and passing the time practicing essential seamanship and mastering various sailing knots. With the boat gliding along softly, it was time for some classic crew entertainment, towing behind the moving vessel on a safety line. Carl led the charge, plunging into the clear water and letting the line drag him through the wake, followed closely by Gustav. Meanwhile, down in the head, Mikhail was entirely oblivious to the nautical acrobatics happening astern. He flushed the toilet, unknowingly discharging the holding tank into the sea right behind the boat. Fortunately, the swimmers had just pulled themselves back on deck seconds before. It was a terrifyingly narrow escape from a very literal, high-speed face full of disaster, leaving everyone laughing in equal parts relief and horror. As the Jameson approached the rugged coastline of Ves, the wind completely died, and the diesel engine hummed to life for the final mile. To celebrate another successful leg, the guys gathered on deck to toast the afternoon with a round of icy, anise-flavored Ricard, letting the French aperitif mark the end of the day's sail. Finding a peaceful, picturesque bay for the night, Kuba and Gustav took charge of the mooring, skillfully swimming line ashore and tying the stern off securely to the coastal rocks. As dusk fell, the crew piled into the fresh dinghy and headed into the main town. For a Monday night, the island was vibrant and buzzing with energy. The guys explored the stone alleyways and waterfront, taking in the local sights before heading back to their floating home. Under the glow of a moon so bright it cast sharp shadows across the deck, the 7 sailors turned in for the night, lulled to sleep by the calm waters of Vis. Chapter 4. The morning on Vis began in paradise. Crystal clear waters, bright blue skies, and another refreshing dive off the side to start the day. The crew took the morning fun a step further, rigging up a harness to hoist each other high up into the sailmast before leaping off into the Adriatic Sea below. When it was finally time to pull up anchor and set sail, the island served up its first real curveball. The anchor windlass died cold. With 30 meters of heavy steel chain still dangling in the deep, the electric winch wouldn't budge. Manuals were flipped through, signal was chased, and calls were attempted to the charter company, but no quick fix was in sight. Refusing to let a broken motor stall the voyage, Theo and Kuba took charge. The crew mobilized, relying on sheer willpower and raw muscle to haul all 30 meters of heavy chain and anchor up onto the deck link by heavy link. The knot-tying practice from the previous afternoon paid off immediately. The guys expertly lashed and secured the heavy chain to the cleats with ropes to keep everything locked down. Soaked in sweat, but victorious, the Jameson was free. Hoisting the sails, Captain Carroll worked his wind-whispering magic once again, trimming the boat until Jameson was skimming past the island's dramatic cliffs at a swift 6.5 knots. As the sun began to dip, the crew enjoyed a fantastic dinner out on the water. Peter took over as bartender, whipping up a round of ice-cold Aperol spritzes. Laughter, jokes, and toasts echoed across the deck in 3 different languages as the 7 friends soaked in the ultimate summer high. There was just one small detail nobody had accounted for. The marina they were aiming for was completely packed, with berths booked out 10 days in advance. A quick pivot was needed, but luck was on their side. A stunning, sheltered bay sat just around the corner. What followed next can only be described as a high-stakes nautical circus. Setting anchor meant manually dropping the massive, heavy chain back down into the depths by hand, all while fighting a tricky crosswind and launching the dinghy to run long shorelines to the jagged rocks on land. After plenty of shouting, maneuvering, and tactical rope work, the lines were secured tight, prompting yet another round of genuine applause from the neighboring boats, who had been watching the spectacle unfold. With Jameson safe and stable, the chaos dissolved into perfection. The crew gathered on deck under a glowing full moon and a warm night breeze, uncorking wine and laying out a spread of cheese. Surrounded by the quiet beauty of the Croatian coast, 7 friends shared stories late into the night, making memories that would last long after the voyage ended. Chapter 5. The morning sun broke over the bay, transforming the seafloor beneath the Jameson into a shimmering display of gold and turquoise. But before any relaxing could happen, the crew's new morning workout regimen had to begin, hauling all 50 heavy meters of steel chain and the anchor back up onto the deck by hand. Muscle-bound and thoroughly awake, the team safely cleared the bay and pointed the bow toward the famed island of Hvar. Midway across the channel, the wind completely died into a glassy calm. Never one to waste an opportunity for fun, the crew tossed a line off the stern to drag behind the boat. Captain Carroll then decided to turn up the stakes, literally, firing up the engine and throttling up to 5 knots. The guys took turns clinging to the rope for dear life as the sea tore past them, laughing and fighting the drag until a sudden near catastrophe put an end to the game. Gustav's shorts were nearly stripped clean off by the sheer force of the water. With the crew safely back on board and full of laughs, the reality of high-season Croatia struck again. Getting a dock on Hvar turned into a high-stakes scramble. The primary harbor turned them away, and with freshwater tanks running low and supplies dwindling, the situation was looking grim. Suddenly, The deck turned into a frantic command center. 7 guys pulled out phones, calling every contact, marina, and port authority within striking distance. Finally, a faint ray of hope emerged. There were potential spots open in a small town on the opposite side of the island, but it was a strict first-come, first-served race against time. Captain Carroll ordered the sails dropped instantly, shoved the engine to full throttle, and the Jameson charged through the water. 2 relentless hours later, they rounded the bend into the narrow, sheltered harbor of Stary Grad, and by sheer stroke of luck, grabbed one of the very last spots available. Determined to avoid the heart-stopping close-call docking moments from their last sailing trip, the crew prepared for a tactical approach. Every man knew his job. With Carl steering with surgical precision and the crew executing flawlessly at the lines and fenders, the Jameson glided into the berth without a single hitch. Within minutes, the power cable was hooked up, the water hose was running at full blast, and the boat's sockets were humming as every device plugged in. High fives and audible sighs of relief echoed through the marina. The day was officially saved. Stepping onto dry land, everyone experienced that classic sea legs sensation, feeling the earth sway like the waves beneath them as they wandered into the picturesque, colorful streets of Stary Grad. The search for fuel led them to a top-tier Argentinian steakhouse. Sitting in the blazing 34 degrees Celsius heat, the guys celebrated their harbor victory over cold beers, incredible food, and endless laughs. The afternoon was pure freedom. Some took off for a run along the coast, others explored the quiet alleys, and everyone took full advantage of the glorious luxury of proper land-based showers. As night fell, the crew cleaned up, dressed to impress, and kicked off the evening with a round of icy limoncello shots. After fueling up on wood-fired pizza in town, it was time to hunt for the night's party. While the historic center was relaxed, a reconnaissance mission earlier in the day paid off. A hidden beach bar tucked away along the shoreline was buzzing. The guys rolled in to find the venue absolutely electric, packed with people dancing to vibrant local tunes. The atmosphere was so contagious, and the crew brought such good energy that the friendly bartenders started handing out free rounds of shots and beers. It was an unforgettable night under the Croatian stars. Well past midnight, the 7 victorious sailors made their way back to the quiet deck of the Jameson, falling into their berths to rest up for whatever the sea had waiting for them next. Chapter 6. Here is the next dramatic, funny, and unforgettable installment in the saga of the Jameson. With the final leg of the trip approaching, it was time to turn the bow toward home. Facing steady headwinds, the crew knew the return journey would be a 2-day tactical grind. The Jameson slipped out of the charming harbor at Stary Grad, weaving through the narrow coastal channel before breaking out into open water, where the sails were hoisted to begin tacking into the wind. What began as a quiet, graceful sail quickly took a wild, bloody turn. At the stern, Peter was attempting to fix a stubborn latch on the swim platform bridge. With one of the aft bench seats lifted out of the way to reach the lock, Peter was using an axe to tap the metal fitting into place. Suddenly, a rogue gust of wind rocked the boat, slamming the heavy seat downward. By an incredible stroke of bad luck, the single small metal bracket on the otherwise plastic seat struck Peter squarely on the head. Blood poured immediately from a clean 20-millimeter gash. The crew jumped into action, grabbing the first aid kit, cleaning the wound, and applying firm pressure to stop the bleeding. While Peter was patched up and stable, it was clear the cut would likely need hospital attention. And a few stitches. Since Cuba already had a flight to catch out of Split the next day, the plan was set for Peter to disembark alongside him at the next port to get proper medical care. With the first aid drama settled, the crew's focus shifted to another vital mission: lunch. The plan was a mid-sea stern barbecue, but as the crew prepped the food, the swell began to build. Strong winds whipped across the deck, cooling the surface of the grill so severely that after a long wait, only the peppers and onions had managed to cook. Admitting defeat to the elements, the crew pivoted, taking the sausages and meat down to the galley stove to fry indoors. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of battling heat loss, waves, and growing appetites, the meal was ready. And then, absolute disaster struck. A massive rogue wave slammed the side of the Jameson. The boat heeled violently, sending the frying pan with all the cooked meat and sausages airborne. It crashed onto the cabin floor alongside a ceramic plate, which shattered into a million tiny shards, burying the long-awaited lunch in a pile of broken porcelain and floor grime. For a moment, the cabin was silent in collective shock. 2 hours of waiting, ruined in a split second. But sailors are a resilient and exceptionally hungry breed. Refusing to starve, the crew launched a tactical salvage operation. They carefully gathered the sausages and meat, meticulously picking through every piece, washing off the floor debris, and double-checking for stray glass. Extra floor seasoning notwithstanding, the meal was served. Eating carefully and picking out the occasional plate fragment, the hungry crew devoured the food, cracking jokes that a little floor dirt was probably good for the gut anyway. As evening fell, the chaos yielded to pure tranquility. The Jameson glided softly through the water under a breathtaking sky. To the north, the soft twilight glow of the sunset faded into dark. To the south, a massive, deep red, blood-orange full moon rose over the horizon, painting the sea in extraordinary light. Finally, after 14 grueling hours of sailing into the wind, the Jameson arrived at her destination for the night. Muscle memory kicked in one last time for the evening, as the crew manually lowered the heavy anchor and all 50 meters of chain into the dark waters. Exhausted, well-fed on floor-seasoned steaks, and sore from the day's adventures, the 7 guys collapsed into their bunks to rest up for the final day at sea. Chapter 7. Here is the final chapter of the epic voyage of the Jameson. The final days of the expedition began with bittersweet goodbyes. Making a pit stop to refuel the tanks, the crew officially sent Peter and Kuba ashore, one to get his battle wound stitched up at the local hospital and the other to catch an early flight out of Split. With the crew now reduced to a core team of 5, the Jameson set her sights on the home port of Beograd Marina. The sea was calm and the sun was blazing, prompting the guys to try their hands at deep-sea fishing. Lacking actual bait, they improvised with the only logical substitute left on board: sausages. Unsurprisingly, the Croatian fish were not interested in the processed meat, but the attempt provided plenty of laughs. Abandoning the fishing, they tossed the tow line out the back one last time, taking turns dragging behind the boat and soaking up the Mediterranean heat. As they closed in on Beograd, the Adriatic decided to give them one last gift. The wind caught up beautifully, filling the sails and tilting the boat into a perfect, aggressive lean. With the hull cutting through the waves, the Jameson hit her top speed of the trip, a glorious 7 knots. The now veteran crew handled the vessel like absolute pros, gliding into the marina and executing a flawless, buttery smooth docking to cap off the week. Safe on land, it was time to celebrate. The guys hit the town for a final dinner before hunting down a party to close out the trip properly. What followed was a night for the history books, largely thanks to Captain Carroll. Shedding his nautical responsibilities, Carroll hit the dance floor going 110%, putting on an absolute clinic. His high-voltage dance show was so legendary it drew actual applause from the crowd. Riding the high of a perfect week, the crew partied into the early morning hours before stumbling back to the Jameson for their final night aboard. But the sea always demands a toll, and the morning brought a harsh reality check. Bleary-eyed but organized, the crew started the cleaning and checkout routine. Everything was going perfectly until the inspection diver popped his head out of the water with bad news. The bow thruster hatch was broken. The crew was stunned. They knew for a fact they hadn't hit a single thing all week. Suspecting either normal wear and tear or a classic charter company deposit scam, Gustav stepped up to the plate. He launched into an intense, tactical negotiation, trying to talk the charter staff out of the absurd 1,200 euros out of water inspection fee. Though the dockside debate ended in a frustrating stalemate, the crew already had their counterattack planned. A heavily armed email was being drafted, detailing the exact state of the Jameson, a completely dead anchor windlass that forced them to haul 50 meters of chain by hand, a faulty plastic bench that gave Peter a bloody head, and a spotless collision record. They were ready to dispute the charge to the bitter end, or, at the very least, leave a scorchingly honest review. It was a sour, bureaucratic note to end on, but as the guys grabbed their bags and walked down the dock one last time, the frustration quickly faded. A 1,200 euro dispute couldn't put a dent in what they had actually gained. They had survived thunderstorms, rogue waves, flying sausages, broken motors, and high-speed towing. The voyage of the Jameson was an absolute triumph of adventure, laughter, and unbreakable friendship, memories that would outlast any marina invoice. The end.